This
afternoon,
conference will
everyone.
now be recorded.
So good afternoon, everyone, and I do apologize to Raghuram for that very difficult to manage acronym. It's actually ASD STE 100. It is a bit confusing for people at times when we use the acronym and Simplified Technical English all in the same breath. And I have to say that although Simplified English disapproves of the use of too many different words for the same idea, ASD STE 100 and Simplified English or Simplified Technical English all mean the same thing in today's presentation. So as you may have already been guessing, ASD actually stands for Aerospace and Defense. So yes, Simplified Technical English does have its roots in the aviation industry already back in the 1980s. And it has been in use in circulation ever since then. And also in this case, the specification is something that is also growing in popular usage in different industries, like the oil and gas, IT, and even as far as genomics, if you think about DNA, RNA, along those lines. So today's presentation is entitled Simplified Technical English. Is it just a very simplified and simplistic dichotomy, or it's everything in the rainbow spectrum? So my name is Shumin, and I'm based in Singapore. I've been working in Simplified Technical English Standards, helping customers since the early 2000s. And I'm glad that after 14 years, I'm still doing it, all because it's something interesting and it keeps my mind really active when it comes to the rewriting process, and that we'll get to witness some rewriting in action in the later part of today. Okay, so why do I have this slide about the Japanese or Chinese word Kaizen? Kaizen really means to get engaged, getting your stakeholders on board with the continuous improvement process of an entire value stream or an individual process that creates more value with less wastage. And that is really a sentence or a statement that sums up the Simplified English spirit as well. So I thought it is a very useful concept to also employ in the area of technical writing, and for that reason, the calligraphy that you see here it's a commission piece that I got a personal friend of mine to work on. So hopefully it brings across the idea that as we continuously engage our stakeholders, we want to create more value for them in the end, with the potential of more savings. Think dollars and cents. So here I'm just going to very quickly share a quick video clip of one of my favorite comedians. He also funnily explains what some of the problems in our everyday use of the standard English language and how we could avoid many of the potential mistakes that nobody seems to have noticed in everyday speech and communication. Enjoy.
Something else we have in common, flying on the airlines and listening to the airlines announcements and trying to pretend to ourselves that the language they're using is really English. Doesn't seem like it to me. The whole thing starts when you get to the gate. First announcement. We would like to begin the boarding process. Word, process, not necessary. Boarding is enough. We'd like to begin the boarding. Simple, tells the story. People add extra words when they want things to sound more important than they really are. Boarding process sounds important. It isn't. People like to sound important, whether television talk about shower activity, more important than peak hours. One guy on CNN talking about a rain event. He said, I was expecting a rain event. I thought, holy shit, I hope I can get tickets to that.
So I think a few of you must be smiling behind your screens because we are, as native speakers of the English language, are very often, more often guilty of these mistakes than not. So the idea of simplified technical English is to control the use of your words. It's to control the number of words you add to your vocabulary, and at the same time making it very, very easy to get your communicative messages across in different fields. So I will probably start off the presentation by throwing you into a slightly deep end of the pool by in the next slide, where we will be sharing some of the case studies, interesting business case studies that we have come across. So obviously, when I say across different industries, we're talking about also aviation. We're also talking about companies that make cars, armored vehicles. Our biggest customer is in the UAE and in Turkey. So they make armored vehicles based on European engineering know-hows and knowledge transfer, and they have their own systems in place. We also deal with customers like PayPal because they often have a set of work instructions for system administrators to follow to try and do regular scheduled maintenance on their work system. So very interesting customers that we get to see and get first-hand feedback about how simplified technical English is extremely useful for their line of work. So here I've for this crowd, I've selected one of our customers that is Acronis. They are based in Singapore and well known for their data protection and cybersecurity solutions, something that will be very, very familiar to most of you. And they came to us with loads of documentation, and one of the rewrites that we did for them is in fact based on an original piece of text where you would probably have to find yourself reading it 2 times over, or at least 2 times, before you can understand what the technical writer is trying to say. So here, to avoid confusion and also for your viewing comfort, I've broken down this text into bite-sized nuggets of information, bite-sized pieces, and hopefully that goes down well with this audience. So the first sentence in one of their manuals reads like that: Acronis Backup and Recovery 11 for Microsoft Exchange Server provides protection for the clustered data regardless of its placement within the cluster. Now, if you remember, simplified English is all about managing your words, managing your word choices, managing the number of words you have in your vocabulary. So in this case, there would be many non-approved words that we flag and thought that, hey, perhaps we could give the sentence a simplified English twist. So taking these non-approved words, chucking them out, and using simpler English words like to give and also to change. So there is also one very practical consideration, that is when your product or your product service name is too long, you would want to consider using just a one-word replacement for it. And in this case, we've selected the word software to just mean, this long string of this string of long name like Acronis, Backup, blah, blah, blah. So we simply call it the software that gives protection for all clustered data. So you see that simplified English is not about it's not about throwing, like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's also about keeping words that are meaningful to your organization. So in this case, clustered data. is part of the technical terminology that we keep. Also, if the data changes its location in the cluster. So no need to say, no need to add extra words like placement or within, because to change its location and the word in would suffice in delivering your technical information 100% across accurately. And then moving on to the next sentence. So you see that here the simplified English writing is very much reduced, decreased in overall text volume, because in the original sentence it says that this means that even if the data being backed up changes its location within the cluster, and then it has a very sudden break in the sentence flow, and then the tech writer decides to throw in an example, for example. So it almost sounds as if he got fed up about explaining how things work and decided to quote an example. So there are overlapping meanings here in both sentences, and it's in fact very disruptive to the reading flow of any sentence, of any information cluster. So we decided that, okay, here it's, for example, when or if the mailbox role moves to a different server. So you only give information that is pertinent at that point in time to the reader, instead of trying to overload the sentence with empty phrases. Okay, so that's also one of the considerations we need to keep in mind as good technical writing practitioners. And the next sentence is that the software will track all relocations of this data and safely back it up. So now we need to give consideration to two words, track and to safely back it up. So back it up as a phrasal verb may be construed in an incorrect way to non-native speakers. I know that to native English speakers, back it up sounds very, very straightforward to all of us, but Simplified English is a common platform where native and non-native speakers of the English language get to enjoy the benefits of. So in Simplified English, one of the recommendations is to avoid the use of phrasal verbs, in this case defined as the use of a verb in combination with a preposition. So back it up. So we would rather change it to a noun, so to create a correct backup. And also the word track is not necessary. The verb track is not necessary in this case, because Simplified English comes with a general dictionary of roughly 900 approved words. So that includes the word to record. So I'm not sure what familiarity you have with Simplified English at this point, but Simplified English is a specification, and it's made into roughly, to be exact, 382 pages of this specification. And the spec, you can easily get it from download it on the website, or you could write to me and maybe get a copy of it. It's currently at issue 7, and the next update will be available in 2021 April. So at this point, you see that in the roughly 400 pages of the spec, 200 pages will explain the rules and the writing practices, and 200 pages are exclusively allocated for the dictionary. And in the dictionary, you will find some of these words like record and track. So what sets the STE apart from corporate style guides? So before I continue, I just wanted to show you what the specification looks like. So here you have the dictionary, which is in the lower half of this page, and in the first page, well, actually, the first page is not so important. It's just a cover and then a few mentions of important people who had a part to play in the writing of the spec, and I'll come to them later. What I really would like to bring your attention to is the, yeah, 1 second, is the dictionary. So really, it's a very useful list of words, over 2,400 of those words, of which 1,500 words are non-approved. The non-approved words are usually labeled here as in the lowercase, and then it's followed by the approved words in the capitalized format. And then you get a few approved examples and non-approved examples. Reading and reviewing these sentences could really do you good in bringing up your proficiency levels for simplified English. So we're not saying that this is a spec that you need to memorize, because you could always reference it, but the training does help to break information down into useful, user-friendly nuggets of knowledge for people to get access to and hit the ground running by writing in simplified technical English already. Okay, so what sets the Simplified English Style Guide apart from corporate style guides is a little bit like this. You might think that this is just really just one of the other style guides that I can pull out from my database and from my drive and just reference those. Really, what is different is that one of the things I've mentioned before, it's been in circulation since the 80s, and the continuous upkeep of this specification is done by a group of dedicated STE maintenance group members who are a diverse community of linguists, engineers, manufacturers, MROs. So MRO stands for maintenance, repair, and overhaul in the airline aviation language. So these people are continuously working hard to update the spec once every 3 to 4 years, and then they are always there and dedicated, whereas a corporate style guide is when you find yourself joining a new organization and presented with a style guide without knowing who the original writer was, probably someone who left the company 5 months ago, and people continue to work with that style guide without ever having an accurate reference point or a go-to person to question some of the rules that were set in stone maybe 10 years ago and have never been changed since. So it's kind of a very stagnated set of rules that you will see lingering. I would call them the ghosts of technical writing, that they continue to linger on in an organization without having anyone ever questioning the validity of those old rules that were set up many years ago. So Simplified English is rather dynamic. It is always constantly being updated, including the dictionary. And having said that, besides the rules and the dictionary, of course, as tech writers, we are entitled, we have the autonomy to add project-specific words to our dictionary based on recommended STE principles. So it gives you some principles, some guidance in selecting your words, and it also shows you how certain words are not necessarily useful anymore. Okay, as I will show you a few examples later on. So I wanted to maybe like offer you a very, what I personally would call it, the silver bullet, because although all the rules, all 53 rules in STE are great and all rules are made equal, some rules are more equal than the others. So you recognize this quote from the Animal Farm. Rule 1.1 really is the silver bullet for Simplified English, because the compliance with this rule alone brings about at least 60% of the benefits of writing in a controlled English or a simplified English manner. Why do I say that? Because it forces you to only tap into approved words. You are only allowed to use technical names that the writing team has approved as a whole. You're only allowed to use specific technical verbs that are necessary for your project, for your organization, for your field of work. It does not allow you to select random words at random and add it to your vocabulary to expand. Because Simplified English works on a vocabulary of words, you should try to keep those number of words to under 2,000 words, because any dictionary that is larger than 2,000 words will mean that the principles of STE cannot work that well anymore. It already means that people do not regard the use of words in a respectful and disciplined way. So that is why Rule 1.1 is what I would affectionately nickname as the silver bullet of any Simplified English implementation. Okay, so if you take a look at these two words, need and want. For those of you who are connected on LinkedIn already, you probably would have read some of my posts about Simplified English words. So need and want, as you can tell, are in the lowercase format. So they are basically non-approved STE words. And if I had to replace them with simpler alternatives, or basically just STE words, then I could say something like, it is not necessary to replace the backing ring, so instead of need, and also to identify the parts that you will install again. You don't need the word want, you simply identify the parts that you will install again. So words like necessary and will that are approved STE entities will replace the use of need and want. So in this way, you don't create like a messy terminology database with all the words that you could ever think of, like need, want, necessary, and will. These are just overlapping words that should be removed and should be dealt with in a disposable manner. Okay. So once you get used to the idea of applying Simplified English to your tech writing, you would see that the number of unique terms in your company terminology will drop by up to a maximum of 70 to 80%. Your translators or project managers will be very happy because in terms of translatability, there is an improvement when used in Simplified English, and they probably also lead to cost savings for your translation projects. And the text volume is sometimes you get it depending on the quality of the original text. It is sometimes you would see that text volume would generally decrease by 20 to 35%. In the case of really bad source text, original writing, then text volume could even be halved after you use Simplified English to write your documentation. So here, it's just a summary of what I would say the promised land of writing in Simplified English is, that you definitely will achieve reduced text volume. Translation costs are always at the back of people's minds. Savings in translation costs can also be rather substantial. If you're thinking about 35% savings in one language times 10, it's actually quite substantial. Your proofreading editors will also need to deal with fewer documentation change cycles. So overall, there is improved team efficiency, less downtime, and also probably fewer communication issues. So good words in the end are worth so much and cost so little. This is a statement that I, as a simplified English practitioner, I really find a lot of resonance in this short little quote here. And I hope by now some of you can relate to the pains of dealing with bad translations and expensive translations, expensive project management cycles, things like that. Okay, so moving on, how do we customize vocabulary and terminology in the context of STE? Well, it's actually quite simple. I could show you many examples for customers, but I've only selected one in this case. So this is a typical list that our customer has built. It's a Russian customer called Kaspersky. You would know them for their antiviral software solutions. They are based, headquartered in I believe it was St. Petersburg, if my memory serves me well. Yeah, so the team that I was working with are based in St. Petersburg. They mostly spoke Russian, and they thought of coming up with a list like this with the third column that bears the Russian translations and meanings. So what happens is that they wanted to put everybody on the same page, that notify has this prescribed meaning, persist has this meaning in Russian, so that everybody starts on the same page. And that is actually a very commonsensical way to move forward with your terminology. Now I have bolded in the left column some words that we think, when they came to us with a huge database of words, I bolded some words that I thought they could probably tap into simplified English words. So words that I did not put in bold are simply words that qualify as their technical names and verbs. So words in bold, we'll take a closer look at them. So here, instead of notify, determine, complete, respond, persist, perform, I'm pretty sure these are common words that you also find in your documents. And then here's the good news, that you could actually replace these words in simplified English by saying it's to know or tell. If you need to check something, you have to do a check, because check as a approved word in simplified English is only used as a noun. So simplified English not only governs the types of it not only governs your choice of words, it also governs the parts of speech. So by the parts of speech, I really mean the grammatical parts, like is it a verb, is it a noun, is it an adjective, and something like that. So there are many parts of speech in English. In simplified English, we need to pay attention mainly to the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, and the adverbs, but we won't go into detail about grammar in today's presentation. The idea is to give you an overview of what simplified English really is and a comprehensive understanding of how it works. Okay, so as an inspirational message that I often share with my students, my clients, when they are on to the second day of that training and they have to start rewriting their own documentation, it is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is usually more that we don't even try or do not dare, that rewriting your documents seems like a huge mountain to overcome. And that is the reason why people attend trainings, just to, like chip off at the mountain bit by bit, and eventually it turns into a mound. So to continue with the example from Acronis, it's that now we have leveled up and we try to rewrite paragraphs into simplified English. Obviously, this is a customer that is not aware about the language that they speak, as in they need to really put some perspective into their writing. So if it starts off like this, cluster-wide protection is useful in the event some of the cluster nodes go offline unless the backed up data becomes completely unavailable or backup plan configuration explicitly prohibits. So to native English speakers, it's not a problem to digest this kind of information. Unfortunately, if my colleagues in Indonesia or in Malaysia, sometimes also in Singapore, if English were not their first language, then this kind of writing is going to snowball into something unacceptable in terms of user comprehension level. So think about help desk, think about support. They probably also got their training based on these manuals, based on documentation like this. So the important steps like firefighting measures that we should take now is to get rid of complex phrasings such as in the event or explicitly prohibits. So words like this have no place in our technical writing field. You probably find them sometimes in legal jargon, but that is something that is out of the jurisdiction or the scope of simplified English, because it really opens another tin of worms, so to speak. So keeping good writing principles in mind and what I've just said, it's important that we do away with phrases like that and instead choose to write it in a very accessible format, like cluster-wide protection is useful when some of the cluster nodes go offline, but not when the backup data becomes unavailable or the configuration does not let, instead of explicit prohibitions. Okay, because those have no place in good technical writing. If you select to backup only the selected node, so again, this is a phrasal verb that we remove and replace with an IT word that is to make a backup if you only make a backup of the selected node. Okay. And any questions at this point before we move on? If Raghuram wants to take questions, you could send your questions his way, and he might want to filter, select a few questions for during the session. It's fine with me. Or if you would like to voice out, speak up, feel free right now before I go on.
Yes, Shumin, all the participants are free to speak anytime. If anyone have questions, please.
I will. So I'm not aware how many people are in this meeting right now. Could you advise first?
Yeah, we have totally 17 participants.
Okay, so because the numbers are a bit high, I will take a pause at, like, for example, this is the first pause that I'm making, and I'm opening up the floor for questions. And then afterwards, I would have another slide and I'll take another pause and then again, questions.
Okay. Hi, Shumin. This is Alpana here.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to know that how do we ensure that in our daily day-to-day documentation work, whether we are using STE phrases in our documentation or no, because up till now we have not been, working so cautiously about it. So how do we start doing that?
So the typical workflow in this case is that there is usually buy-in at the top management, and they would then approach us to consult and see how we could proceed with the training. So the training alone might help. It is a little bit like getting through the first part of like the idea buy-in for Simplified English. When people get trained and they are forced to work in Simplified English for half a day, in the second day of the workshop, then they will hit the ground running, writing STE. But as I've said before at the start of the presentation, this is a continuous improvement process. It's very Kaizen in essence. So companies will resend the, like if they said they send 30 engineers for this training, then they might select 3 engineers for the next recurrent training. And this would be the main task force that is responsible for maybe selecting words that people will continue to use. It depends also on your editing environment. Do you have a terminology database that people tap into? Things like that. And hopefully in the later slides of Pana, I could show you a little bit more about how different teams work across different locations, because by now we're very used to working with people from the same organization, but few of them could be based in India, and the main team is still working in Abicon, Switzerland. So hopefully we get to that point, and that's where I would like to share more information. Great question, by the way.
Yeah, but this can happen when there are lots of engineers who are working on the documentation in an organization where only a few handful of them are there in the individual contributor. So in that case, how do we ensure? Because the organization might not send them for this kind of training, you know. So the individual contributor, they have to learn by themselves. So in that case,
Yes.
how should they take care of it?
Okay, so in my 14 years of the same career, I've only met of one team who has been independently studying the spec for the last 8 years and writing in semi-successful Simplified English. They're based in Pennsylvania. They work in motion sensors for healthcare, for machinery, for equipment, for very sensitive equipment. And these are native speakers, just like yourselves. But they do set up like a task force that are very disciplined in the way they execute Simplified English. Now, the reason why they spoke with us and came for this training is because studying the spec alone is very dry, but it's not impossible. And studying the spec alone without this training is it's quite a challenge. And if you're talking about a team of engineers, then how you need to answer this question: how do you make sure that everybody I'm not sure about you guys. How do you make sure that everybody for example, a 40-hour work week, how many hours would they dedicate to writing in STE? Or how many hours in a work week would they dedicate to learning or reading STE examples? So this is one approach to digesting the information, but it's challenging at best. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that was a good question, and I'm glad we had this conversation so that other people can also learn from the experience, from your experience especially. Okay, so SE for different industries. Now, I've had a look at all of the document submissions. I did. I really did. So I've selected 2 of them, which I felt were quite good learning materials for today's session. So thank you all who submitted and contributed to today's session. And I would like to take us all into Google Drive and take a look at one of the documents for now first. Okay. So I know it looks a little bit intimidating with all the green and yellow highlight, but trust me, it's really not. It's only because I have been working on this file and giving my input in Simplified English. So the sorry, see this. The original file, oh, also it looks pretty well edited. So, okay, so let's maybe take a look at this for now. So I'm not sure if the person who contributed to this document is here in the audience today. If you are, maybe you could share a few words on this document, where it came from, what it's who were the intended audiences for this document, and yeah, and why did you choose this document for STE?
I guess Anita Das is not there. Anandita Das is not in this meeting. Anandita, are you there? Yeah, she's
Okay,
not
so
there.
we probably don't have enough information here to take this discourse to a higher, more detailed level, because there was one sentence that I highlighted here, and I wasn't sure if this is the correct way to put the sentence out across to your audience. So if anyone in the audience is a subject matter expert on this data migration and database server configuration, feel free to contribute and share your 2 cents worth once we get to that sentence. So so the first sentence is actually, this is an FAQ section found in the product in the manual, and the first question is about the typical increase in size of a database, and also how much time is required for data migration. So you see that there are many extra words like typical. It's an approved STE word, by the way, but increase, it's really not approved in STE, because in STE, when I look into the dictionary, it tells me that increase is only used as a verb. Okay, it's only approved as a verb, and so the use as a noun is non-approved, as you could see here in lowercase. All right, so there must be an increase in temperature. It's not a good sentence. The temperature must increase is the STE recommended answer in this case. So how much does the application A database increase in size usually to replace typically? And how much time is necessary for data migration? Because take is not approved, necessary is approved word. Okay, now some of you may be scratching your heads and think like, oh, how does she know if one word is approved and not the other? Do you mean that Shumin in her 14 years of STE has managed to memorize all 2,500 words? The answer is no, obviously not. It's just that through experience and through a relatively higher proficiency level, I'm able to remember some of those key simple words that I want to replace. And so that's why it seems like I'm a genius at STE, but the truth is I rely on the dictionary half the time for words that I'm not sure of whether they are approved or not. But you will, with practice and with skills accumulation, get hang of some of those key STE words that are not approved and approved. Okay, so the next sentence is this: database size depends on the type of interactions and their distribution. Depends on is not approved. So we could say that the different types of interaction and their distribution can change. So change is a very simple and good word to have in STE, can change the database size. Okay. Now, the next sentence, I would need some help or input from the audience. Time taken for data migration is a factor of the source database size and database server configuration. So this is a little bit like I'm not sure if the cart is put in front of the donkey or the donkey is should, you know, it's like it's this kind of question. Is it a chicken or egg question? Is it that the database size contributes to the time necessary? But here in this sentence, it seems to suggest that the time for data migration is the cause of the database size. It didn't sound right, at least to my ears. And so I thought this was a problematic sentence, and we could hopefully change that. Yeah. So we're looking at the sentence. I could look at it from an STE point of view, but I also need to check for accuracy. Does it make sense? Any second opinion from the floor?
Yeah, to my knowledge, it is due to the, I mean, because based on the database size, the time taken will be dependent. That is what it is trying to say.
So the source database size and database server configuration will decide how much time is taken, correct?
Yes, yes.
So we need to change this sentence around to say that, so let me put it in uppercase. The source database size and database server configuration will have an effect.
Can't we instead say it will determine the time taken?
Determine, I'm sorry, it's not an approved word.
Okay.
So you see, the fun bit about STE is that it's not just a learning process. It's also a process of unlearning. So unlearning those words that we acquire in our later stage of school education. So it's a little bit like returning back to school and thinking of those words that you only pick up in your formative years, your first 2 years of school learning, and then like trying to shed off words, bigger words that you pick up when you were trying to complete your university thesis. It happened to me, and it was I would say it was a humbling experience. So
What about
determine, as you
impact?
can tell, can have an impact. Okay, let's see. I'm not going to say no again. I'll let the specification do the talking. So here, impact is a noun. It's not approved. It's to hit as a verb. So we're trying to simplify the language so that more people get access to technical content, technical information. They cannot just be empty big words. So that's the reason why, unfortunately, but thank you for your contribution, that those suggestions did not, unfortunately, I cannot use them in this sentence here.
And is future tense allowed in STE?
Yes, it is. Only in recent years. Before, in the early 2000s, they said no to future tense, and many people made a big fuss over it. They wrote in, they sent in their feedback, and finally, already since 2013, I believe we have future tense in STE.
Okay, and on that same note, this is a question to you and everyone else. Is future tense getting acceptance even in technical writing now?
Of course. Unless you have a different story to tell.
No, I mean I've always learned it that okay, you can't use future tense. You can only use present tense. And the
Right.
past tense
That
is
was
used only if you want to. The past tense is the only exception you can make, and that is when you want to suggests that there was an issue that was there in the software which got fixed later on. So in the release notes, when you're if you're recording a bunch of fixed or open issues which are closed in the current release or in the new release, in that case you can use past tense. Otherwise, it's only present tense all through.
Yes, what you are saying is very accurate about the history of technical writing, that in the past, many manual style guides, they don't approve of the use of future tense, and then you have a very restricted way to use past tense only under if certain conditions are met. So here in STE, I'm happy to report that the restrictions are not so tight. So they only have, you're allowed up to 6 different tenses. So let me just pull this information out for you. So here you could use the infinitive, the imperative, the present tense, the past tense, past participle as an adjective. This is a little bit more complex, but I won't talk about it much. The future tense, okay? So no other extra terms and conditions are attached. So that I thought was quite nice.
Okay, and on that note, I'm going to ask one more thing because I saw it in a previous slide that you shared. You had used the term it, it.
Yes.
The pronoun, the third person pronoun, singular, it. Or it's,
Yes.
sorry. You had used a possessive case. So is it allowed? Because technical writing doesn't allow it either.
It's a very good, it's a very cool question. It's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because I'm also aware that, and I believe it was the Microsoft Style Guide that disapproves of the use of pronouns. So on the contrary, Simplified English embraces the use of pronouns like we as the manufacturer, if you see on my screen, and you as the user.
Right. We and you is allowed. It is my question.
It as well. There is no recommended answer here, but there is no to use the words of the original one of the sentence. There is no explicit prohibition. So in fact, it is an approved pronoun. That thing. Carefully remove the deflector unit until it carefully move the deflector unit down until it engages. So the nice thing about STE is that I could always tell people I'm writing according to Simplified English. Here's the spec. If you want to challenge this, you could challenge the spec, and they don't have to challenge me. So it's one of the finer ways, one of the more elegant ways that some of my tech writer colleagues do in their organization, when they only start off with a team of 15 writers, and then other departments want to buy in, or they would sometimes throw out questions and challenge the validity of words. They have this very good conversation going because everything is governed by a spec.
Right. I think it all depends on what kind of style guide one is using in the organization.
Yes, and also, like I've said, you could never be sure if these style guides get updated regularly. So it's not a very stable, a credible source, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
thank
that's
you.
good. So let's continue. For now, I would invite the floor to maybe take one or 2 minutes to digest these few lines of text. Okay. And for those of us who don't intend to speak, please kindly mute your mics so that we could minimize background noises.
Shumin, can you go back to the earlier sentence that you corrected in STE above? Yeah. So can we write this in this way? The source database size and server configuration will have an effect on the time necessary during data migration instead of mentioning database twice.
Which database should I remove?
The second one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's understandable. I don't see why not, unless there is like a violent protest here. So I'm just going to remove it. So please take a few minutes to review this part here that I've highlighted based on tests. The writing in black is the original language, and the writing in green is the source, is the STE text. Okay, and let me know how you feel after reading these two texts.
I think the one in the green is easy to understand than the one in the black.
Okay, so there are a few reasons. The reasons could be the word choice, could be the way you reorganize the sentence structure, or both. Okay, so this is really one of the things that we're trying to impress on our audience, that when you start writing in STE, the hard work is like the Kiwis always say, that easy reading is damn hard writing. So we really have to work very hard to make the reading part easier for our customers. So for this reason, I selected this part. And if you think about it, words like perform, uh, perform, what else? Words like tabulated, they have no place in our language, really, because the word table will suffice. And indicated, we also don't need this word, because show is good enough. But to be fair, let us just do a quick check on the word indicate. So indicate is not approved. Okay, so a show is a good enough word to in this case to take care of the technical content, right? And we're not, if of course, if you said today that Shumin, I'm going to quit my job as a technical writer 2021 onwards, then you want to pursue your aspirations in novel or writing fiction, then obviously STE has no good part to play in that case. So yeah, we need to be very aware of the roles that we play, because I do have colleagues who used to be aspiring fiction book writers, and then in the end, it was more to work as a tech writer that pays off a bill. So it's about priorities. It's about the shoes that you wear, and therefore, as tech writers, we have to be mindful about the words, and making sure that big words like those in bold have no place in our technical writing page. Okay. So let's continue for a bit more in the second part of this text here. How do I know? Of course, I won't be doing most of the talking today because I've allocated some work afterwards for us to review as a group, as a team. So how do I know if data migration was successful? Well, already in real life, it's hard to define what is success. In philosophy, it's also hard to define what is the meaning of success. So I guess in technical English, we should stay with the word correct. Okay, because correct is an approved STE word. When data migration is completed once, it's not approved. Okay, you have to say one time, but one time does not fit the context here. So let's see. Once is an adverb, it's not approved. It's only to push the switch one time. So one time does not fit this. So once or when the unit is on, it's mounting, lock it. So this is the reason why I replaced once. So don't worry, there are many things that you don't know yet, because these things are only communicated in a full-blown training, and for today's session, it's only like a rehearsal of what a full-blown training might be like. So when data migration is completed, you could do away with the rest of the sentence. This is ST is also a little bit like cutting out the dead wood. So we don't need extra sentence to help. If they don't add meaning to that sentence, then we do away with those extra words. So when this is completed, what happens? The enable checkbox is disabled. So I cannot change this because I assume that whatever you find here in the colon, sorry, not the colon, but the apostrophes, is that it's part of the interface. So this is really an interface wording. We cannot change that. And so then the next bit is that the data migration status section, the status is displayed as stopped. No, we could say, this is not a very direct sentence. We could say that the status section and data migrated percentage is shown as 100. So you say that this section stops. You don't need to add extra words by saying that it's shown as, it stops. And then you see that the percentage for data migration is shown as 100. Okay, so again, I assume that these are standard phrasings used in the interface, in the software interface. And for that, we cannot apply STE to those words, because once you change the naming, it might add more confusion than you would have hoped for. Now, if you store things, where are migration log files kept? Okay, and remember I said check is only used as a noun. So you do not need to check the status. You look at the status and you refer to the table where the file is kept. So
sorry to interrupt, Shumin. Your voice is breaking a little bit. Can you just check from your end?
Okay, one sec. It could be oh yeah, it's because my laptop is running out of power. Just 1 second while I get it charged. Just a moment. I do get carried away when I keep talking. Yeah. Is it better now, I hope?
Yes.
Can you still hear me well? Yes? Okay. Perfect. Sorry for the interruption, but whatever you missed, I was basically trying to bring across the message that a technical STE writer's role, her job is to look at sentences and find those non-approved words, and then you replace them. So you see that I keep replacing the word stored with kept. That's an STE word. And also in the rewriting process before, I mentioned about phrases like enable data migration to new database that could be very well standard interface wordings. And for that reason, we don't change them. We leave them as they are. Because we do not want to add to the confusion, because there's no way we could apply STE to existing standard user interface unless something changes in the future. Okay, moving on to the last bit here. If you could see, is there any user intervention required during data migration? Now to the trained STEI, any is not approved, required is also not an approved word. So instead of using those unapproved words and risk lowering our text quality, we don't want to compromise that, as some STE checkers will give you a score as you write, depending on how many non-approved words you insist on using, then you get a score deduction. So what it is here is that is user intervention necessary instead of required? And not using the word any does not make my sentence lose any of its meaning. So the sentence meaning is still intact. So I drop the word any, I replace required with necessary, and then I proceed with the rest of the sentence here. So finally, it's user intervention necessary during data migration? Question mark. So when data migration is scheduled, the system automatically starts, stops, and continues, because the original sentence reads like that. The system automatically addresses the start, stop, blah, blah, blah. So address is a verb. We don't need this extra verb. It is also very often confused with the address, where some residential's person's residential address. So we don't want that. We simply say it automatically starts, stops, and continues its activities. And then the last bit is still, once again redundant, does not need any user intervention, because this very sentence is addressing that concern. Okay, so if you're still with me and not lost in the clouds or in the forest, in the woods, by now I hope you can see what I'm getting at. It's that simplified English, besides those rules, besides those words, it's also a mindset of doing away with unnecessary information and avoiding information overload altogether. And this is a mindset that it doesn't happen just with the click of a button or the push of a button. It happens with practice. It happens with the right skill sets. It happens with the right person who trains in this standard. Okay, the last question: how do I handle failovers after successful upgrade during the audit migration? Blah, blah, blah. So what should I do? Actually, should is not an approved word. So I could say, what must I do in a failover that occurs during the audit data migration in application cluster environment? Okay, so I did away with after successful upgrade, because I thought that was understood. If you think it's not really, if it's something important, then maybe this parenthesis should be put back into the new sentence. But in any case, this rewrite here is to highlight the fact that I don't need the word handle. It's not important for my technical writing purpose.
So can I write that as, can you go a little up? How do I Um, how do I deal with the failover? I'm kidding. How do I is not correct?
It's correct, except that what verb do you want to use in this case?
Can we use mitigate in place of handle?
Or how do I address failover?
But address is, again, like I've said here, is not necessary to use it. Sorry, I didn't catch the other answer from a male participant.
How do I mitigate instead of handle?
Yes, mitigate is a great word, but I'm not sure if it's a word that has its place in STE. Okay, if you want to use words like mitigate, consider your audience and think if they would have a hard time understanding the word mitigate. Maybe not a hard time, maybe it's just clicking a few words. Mitigate. Mitigate has the meaning, has the allusion to decrease or lessen. Okay, but it's clearly not an approved STE word, so I won't use it there because it only makes the sentence harder to understand. I could say if as you suggest, if you want to use how do I, maybe I could say how do I operate in a failover. Operate is an STE word. But I thought what I must do is it's more relevant to the situation. Hence, I came up with this rewrite. So this is the fun bit that happens normally in a 1 to half day workshop that writers would at first, you see them struggling a bit and then they're trying to brainstorm for the different words and the different writing to be compliant in STE. So this is really the part that motivates or inspires people to continue gaining proficiency. After all, we think we are native English speakers, but at the same time, learning simplified English is a little bit like picking up a third language. It's a little bit like that for sure. And for that reason, it takes time. It takes a little bit of effort. And if you think you like this kind of rewriting challenge, I would say go for it. It's really one of the things I enjoy very much in coaching people to do in the STE writing process. Okay, but don't lose hope. There will be more examples coming up later, and I'm really very much looking forward to your participation. If you think if I shot you down this time, if I shot down your sentence this time, don't worry, try again, and I promise it will be a very fun and interactive experience for this afternoon. So the rest of the paragraph, I don't think I will go through, but I will give you like a minute to digest and see how STE writing really works in practice. So we did away with unnecessary words. We also did away with the continuous tense that's not approved, the ing form. Passive sentences are also not great, although you could use them sparingly, not always. It's always good to give instructions in in perfect tense. It's always good to give instructions in the active voice, not passive. Okay, so the more you read and review these documents, the more you see that simple words are reused time and time over. the words continue, correct. And that's really how you gain an appreciation for the simplicity of this controlled language, English language standard.
Should there be a space between application and A?
I didn't put that. I didn't include that because I wasn't sure if it was the naming convention or something. I just treated it as an entity, but it's also a good point. Likely so, yes.
Can be the application name itself.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
No, I thought it is the application name itself. Maybe
Yeah,
she wanted
it
to
could,
maintain the anonymity.
yeah, could be a placeholder. Okay, so if I don't get any more comments, I'm ready to move on, as ready as you are. So we've done STE for different industries. Now let's reset the mood and bring ourselves back. That was very much software related and application based. So now I would like to take us all to Switzerland, where my customer is based in Ebikon. It's also the home to one of the tallest riding elevator shaft that's built outdoors. So it's not like you walk into a building, you take the lift up. It's a shaft that's built outdoors. So when you take this elevator in the Swiss mountains, you actually get a view on the condition that you don't feel sick with seeing like the full drop below your feet. So this is a customer, a very interesting project that we did for them in 2016 or 17. And they make elevators, mobile walkways, escalators as well. So the team I'm working with deals with the lifts, the elevators, and it's important that they do regular maintenance in the shaft, in the lift shaft. And also, so this is one of the type of writings that came from the documents. What you see here at the top is the original writing, and then what you see at the bottom is what we try to rewrite in STE. So we did away with the non-approved words and we turned it into a noun. It's a material check and storage. Before you plan the installation, instead of planning, you do not just check the safety requirements, you obey. So in the context of Schindler, it's important that compliance is not just compliance, it's also obedience to the rules. So obey the safety requirements and safety regulations. You make sure that the work site is always clean instead of at all times. And you must complete each task before you start the next task. So doing away with the continuous tense once again. Okay. It's also unfortunate that one of the occupational hazards the technicians have to deal with is falling from height. We have to tighten this kind of writing to make sure that everybody does the right stuff, complete the right steps, and then they don't risk any falls. Think the skyscrapers in Shanghai, China, and you would not want to risk any falls. So we try to, they also, by the way, have an office in India. I don't know which city, but in Shanghai, China for sure. So we would like to minimize this kind of writing where you say that a gap that is more than, we avoid the use of mathematical signs in, there was a small debate in the training that some people, half of the trainees wanted mathematical and scientific symbols and the other half not. So the other half who said no to mathematical symbols were people who were the linguists, the language managers, project language managers who had to deal with translation. So obviously this kind of symbols might cause mistranslations, especially if the writing is in Arabic when it's from right to left. Okay, so that's one thing. And what other things came out from the discussion is that they agree or they acknowledge that they have many unnecessary words like could result. It's in their writing in the sentences, so can cause persons to fall into the hoistway, and then you make sure any gaps. So it's better to say make sure that than make sure. I know it's still a correct English sentence if you leave out that, but in the terms of natural language processing, the word that introduces the subclause. So it's like a visual or linguistic marker to tell the reader that more information will come, and it's perfect British English. Here, without the that, it's more like, I would say, it gives me the impression that it's an American tech writer who's behind that sentence. So I try to do well. Singapore subscribes to the UK system at school, so we have that in our sentences. So that's only good hygiene, writing hygiene. Then the lanyard attached. So this sentence is really too long. So me and the writer, the engineer, American engineer, decide that we should break this sentence up into two parts. So first you make sure that the gaps are larger than 300 millimeters with all the safety attachments in place. And then we talk about the lanyard that attaches to the bracket on the car roof, and that connects to the full body harness. Okay. So one sentence, one idea, one step, unless those steps need to be mentioned, they need to be completed at the same time. So this is really our approach for this customer in Switzerland who builds elevators. And I would like to now move on to what Simplified English means for us at Schufranz, the company that I work for. What it means to us as a company is that getting into business in the early 2000s, we started the movement of bringing this language specification also to the other industries, into automobile, car manufacturers, armored vehicles, consumer electronics. Think Samsung, who makes washing machines, TVs, LEDs, and phones. And at times we also get requests from banks who are trying to sort out their legal jargon so that people could take up scholarship or housing loans from the credit unions in a way that both parties are aware of the terms and conditions instead of being trapped in legal technical jargon. So Simplified Technical English for us as a company has come a long way. It is very versatile, considering the fact that it's updated regularly. People can send in their feedback. There is a two-way communication about this, and we do not recommend that people are loners. They don't operate alone. You need buy-in, you need key stakeholders engagement. People need to work as a team to standardize the vocabulary, to standardize the rules, to agree that every day or every week as an outsourced writer, I will dedicate 4 hours to writing, and I come back to Shumin after the workshop to consult like that. It's a post-training consultation that we offer. So because we have had such a long history in Simplified English, our colleagues at the STC Finland have nicely done up this cartoon. They felt inspired enough to make the change based on Simplified English, and for that we wrote an article, and they nicely came up with this cute illustration that we still use for since 2012. So in the end, your goal as a communication professional is to ensure higher consistency, improve readability, better translatability, think cost savings, improve translation quality, and overall you would like to reduce the chances of occupational hazards. You would like to lower the incidence rate. You would like to reduce translation costs, minimize number of ambiguities, things like that. So talking about a recent customer of ours who is in the business of oil and gas, they build oil rigs. So for that, they would also like to standardize their the standard jobs that they do on board those rigs that are, you know, if you're drilling and for oil and things like that, you really need to keep in mind when the alarms will go off. Can you see the alarms under high loud noise conditions, things like that. Very, very safety oriented, and safety, they think of it in terms of capacity. It's not the absence of incidents. It's also the ability and the capacity to react in the case of an emergency. So Simplified English is just one of those pillars that is used on board these rigs. It's definitely a safety-driven consideration when customers come to us for help in STE implementation. Okay. So I've been speaking for 90 minutes now, and I think it is a good point for us to pause for questions.
Hi Shumin, this is Bapi here.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, so during our discussion only, you have given some suggestion, like you have corrected the previous document, and over the time, some of our other members also given their own suggestion. So likewise, if we are working in a team and everybody has their own understanding, and at last we need to come in a certain point where everybody has to agree. So how do we come up in a same we have a same page as a final go ahead for any document?
Again, I believe it all points back to whether there is buy-in from the top. If it's a top-down organization, how does your company's hierarchical ranks build? Is it very flat or is it top-down? And if there is a consensus, like if there is a strong mandate from the top, then it's a very straightforward issue. If it's a rather flat hierarchy, then I would suggest everybody attend the same training and debate it out in that training during the rewriting, because this builds rapport amongst the team members. because it's during the workshop that you are coming face to face with the writing that you did, because no other times of the day during the work week would anybody voluntarily pull out a document and say, I wrote this and let me have a look if it's compliant with STE. It's only when you put people in the same room or in the same training and they have confronted with the same piece of writing that they reach a consensus. So I thought this could be it could be an interesting project for you to take on if you want to get people to reach a final agreement on some things. There will not be any conversations in the pantry or in the corridor where it concerns STE or coming to a fixed decision. It's only when people are confronted as a group with the same writing that, yes, then you get to hear feedback and then you get to incorporate those.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
think agile team facilitation work. That would be a good framework to go by.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so coming to my next slide. If you have any questions or interesting tidbits to share about STE, you are most welcome to visit the page on LinkedIn. It's sometimes it has been growing. We have over 2,200 people in one of the groups and over 1,000 people. How do you get access to this page? I don't know how people find us, but anyway, you will find us if you just type Simplified English or Simplified Technical English. The other way to approach this is if you just go to our website. Just one second. Okay, if you just visit our website, which is shufrance.com, and if you just hit on the contact page, just go to the contact page, and then here you get a list of different STE forums that you would potentially want to join. Not many choices, it's either this or that. So you could join both. Sometimes the discussion, the conversation gets very interesting in the aerospace and defense side, usually by non-aerospace people. I wonder why that is, but yeah. So this could be an option to get more involved and gain a better understanding about how STE works for different customers. Let's see what else I have for you. So I promised also as part of the agenda to talk about implementing STE with minimal disruption going on. It takes a Kaizen mindset. It also takes an agile mindset. It most importantly, it has to be an audience that is convinced that STE is the way to go for the organization. So when it comes to managing different teams, say I have 3 writers, 3 engineers who sits in the North American office, 3 who sits here in Singapore with me, and 2 in Japan who are part-time writers. And if they all had their own individual preferences on how to write a technical sentence. So for example, a group of them prefer to say execute the task, be responsible for a task. Singaporeans would say take on the task, perform the task, and in simplified English it's only to do the task. Then it will be hard to eliminate these differences, and I believe this is the kind of problem that shows up a lot in your workplaces. And we're not even talking about different locations, we're only talking about one office. Already you get that. So when you decide to adopt STE as a standard, although that may not eliminate 100% all individual choices, preferences, and peculiarities, at least you are putting people together to fish from the same pool of words, to tap into the same vocabulary, governed by solid STE rules, and you end up with more consistent user guides and manuals, all coming from the same brand. I'm not sure if you have come across manuals that are labeled under one brand and yet they could read differently based on different product lines, and that is not very good when it comes to a corporate branding. So we're all about less rework and editing at the end, and we're all about speaking or writing with one voice. Okay, so it's an ongoing process. We have to keep the flow going, which is why we offer post-training support for our customers. We want to keep the conversations open, the dialogues open, and so it's always a back and forth process between different groups of people. We start off with training and implementation. If they have a budget and they think that they want to go like the extra mile to ensure STE compliance, they take on a software checking tool with us. We do the consultation, of course, when it comes to building the vocabulary for customers, and also the end result is that after this training, they also would sometimes outsource part of the documentation editing to me, to us. Yeah. Okay, so I would like to bring your attention finally to this publication, which I find very nice. It is an old publication, but it doesn't mean that it's outdated. I like at least in APAC, what I find from my observations is that the Japanese market is huge when it comes to machine translation. So that explains why this paper is probably why a Japanese author would be interested in looking into this. So what I find based on the many years of implementation and working with customers for STE is something that's also backed up by research, which shows that the use of CL, which is controlled language or simplified English in this case, improves the final machine translation quality of customers' text. And given this finding, we expect by extension that the usage of simplified English eventually leads to greater productivity in the post-editing team or post-editing environment. So in a way that these three parts affect or influence one another in a three-pronged relationship, that your simplified English, machine translation quality, as well as your post-editing will all benefit from this positive cycle. What you put in, you get a better input, you get a more accurate output, excuse me, and then in the end it they all contribute to overall team productivity. So if you are interested, I would recommend you look up this paper. It's also free to download on the web. And if not, then please write to me again. But I doubt they changed any of the terms and conditions for download. Okay, it's an interesting read, and I think today's session is. I hope today's session was useful for you, and it sheds more light on the mysterious specification of simplified English, if it was a mystery to you before. And just to make sure that we're still good on the timing, I would like to now show you a second sample of what was submitted here. Sorry, it's not this one. Yes, so is the author of this document in this meeting group or not? Sandeep. It
Again,
is
it's not
sometimes so. Yeah, today's session feels a little bit like a lucky draw session. We have a few lucky winners, but they're both not here. So the rest will only get to benefit from today's learning. Okay, so Sandeep actually gave a very nice document that I thought would be the classic text for STE rewriting. So he is probably in the business of elevators because we're talking about overspeed governors here. It's a mechanism that is installed to prevent the elevator from moving too quickly in the shaft. Okay, so as you can see from this original writing, you have quite a handful of unapproved words. So we could do away with any here. So we could say leaking oil, but then is it necessary to call it leaking oil, or is it better to call it oil leakage? Because oil leakage is really the prescribed STE wording in this case. So oil leakage can be collected by placing the clean cloth under the overspeed governor. So oil leakage, this is a complex tense. If you're not familiar with the complex verb formation, then I would have to refer you to a training. We don't use complex verb tenses in STE, so for this reason, I would say place. Okay, so here this is a passive and also a continuous tense, so not so very good. So before I tell too much, any suggestions on how you think you could write this better?
Oil leakage is collected
Uh-huh.
by cleaning cloth. No, by
So we have suggestions like that. Oil leakage is collected by the cleaning cloth. Already the sentence looks a bit better because you do away with the complex verb. But to save us some time, I would say use
Place the cleaning cloth under the overspeed governor to collect oil leakage.
yes, use a cleaning cloth under the overspeed governor to collect the oil leakage. I like the sentence suggestion very much. Thank you. Why did I remove place? Because place is not approved. You have to say put or use. And I like this sentence very much, primarily because it's a very instructive work sentence. It's giving you direct instructions. Use a cleaning cloth or put a cleaning cloth under the overspeed governor to collect the oil leakage. Every verb here is active. It puts the person into what puts him to work, and he starts making sure that you don't get all this dirty stuff collecting underneath. Okay, so I think I'm quite happy with the progress that we've made here. And I think the rest of the document is pretty much telling us how we should be more mindful to maybe this is not an elevator example. I don't have the context, but it seems to be related to aircraft. So I would invite you to still take a look at this sentence and tell me in the next few minutes if there are any parts that you think could be better worded in simplified English or just in technical English, and then I will open the floor for questions. So I would say this here, you must note the position of the bracket. It must be installed.
I think there should be a semicolon after bracket 6, close bracket.
Which one? number.
In step number 3, note the position of the bracket 6. Instead of a comma, maybe a semicolon.
I know. That's the part. I appreciate what you're trying to say here. Semicolons, unfortunately, are not approved in STE because they only encourage people to pack extra information into the same sentence, and anyway, note is not approved. So we have to say, know the position of the bracket. You must install it in the same position, like that.
Or maybe you must install the bracket as shown in 6 or something.
Very good. Yes, you must install the bracket as shown. Bracket is 6 is actually the component part. So you must install, let me just try and type it out. You must install bracket numbers, which is the component part
As shown
in
or
the
same position.
Yes, as shown.
As illustrated.
Good.
Yeah, as shown or as illustrated. Yeah.
Illustrated is too big a word. Remember,
Okay.
we only use simple words. Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. It's very good.
Or can we write it as bracket 6 must be installed in the same position as shown?
Okay. So you just said must be installed, right? So
Bracket.
remember, this is really the complex verb, must be installed. It's like when you think about complex verbs, you're thinking about having like 3 words to just demonstrate one action. So we don't do that in STE. We try to do away with must be installed, can be installed, verbs like that.
Or install bracket 6 in the same position as shown.
Very good. That is very good. That is completely STE sentence. In the position as shown. So Raghuram, I think you have an audience of semi-trained STE experts. Do you think we need to continue?
Yeah. Yeah, Shruti. We have some very good audience.
Yes. So I think by now it is clear what message we're trying to send with STE. And I've shared with you the resources that you could tap into for our training, and if not a training, what other communities you could get involved with. Okay, so if you have any questions, write to me. Yeah, and if you have also any questions, speak now, because we still have a few minutes left, 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, Shumin,
Yeah.
I have a question. Can you go back to the earlier example that we were discussing right now? Install bracket 6.
Okay.
Yeah, so here we are mentioning install bracket 6 in the same position as shown. So do we need to mention shown where? Below or in figure 6 or figure 5 or whatever? Is that
It is
the
better
correct?
to do that, yes. It is better to do that, but since we're missing the context and the contributor is not here, it's hard for me to answer this question, but I would always say as shown in blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Achha, now suppose the figure is placed immediately after this sentence. So is it better to write the figure number or as shown below?
It's better to always have a figure number so that the reference point will not change even if the page formatting has changed.
Okay.
You never know where below references to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I think when you're, I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but I think when you're saying the words, using words like below, we are kind of disregarding people who are probably having certain challenges, like people who can't see. So I mean, if you say above and below, they recommend you use under instead of using below, under something.
But it's equally not so helpful.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's if I had a disability or I could not even find something that's below, then it doesn't help in my situation. So I would still rather have a label in this case.
Yeah, label, I agree. Yes, yes. But I'm talking about the preposition above or below.
Prepositions for below and under, definitely you could use it in STE, but it is about installation parts, like the date is written below the cylinder neck. It's about physical entities that you can touch, feel, and hold and take a look at. So below
Right.
is approved, but under is not approved. So
Okay.
the situation here is a little bit the opposite of what you just mentioned, but it's
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
it's not nothing to worry about, because ST is a specification. They have their own they came to their own consensus, and yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Shumin, one more thing. Like if suppose we mention the figure number, right, as shown in figure so and so. So is it recommended to give a link to that particular figure number so that it, when you click on that, it takes you to that particular figure? Or just mentioning the figure number is enough?
I cannot speak from an STE perspective, but I could speak from experience that most of my customers have a link in the PDF files that I've come across.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
most welcome.
Anyone else have any questions? We are already almost done with the session. Okay, if you have any questions, please reach Shumin with the email ID she has provided. Thanks, Shumin, for patiently answering all the questions and your.
It's been a wonderful session, despite the hiccups before. I've thoroughly enjoyed today's interaction, and thank you for your contribution and your active comments. So keep them coming. We keep in touch.
Yeah, sure, Shumin. Thanks a lot. Though there was a delay in the session, we are very happy that you comprehensively covered all the aspects of STE, and also thanks to all the participants who patiently moved to the go-to meeting in a shift swiftly. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. So
Thank
this
you.
session is recorded. I'll be sharing you in few days.
Okay.
Thanks, Shumin.